Test 4, Part 1. You will hear a man who works at an employment agency phoning a woman who is looking for a job. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5. Hello. Oh, hello. Is that Julie Davidson? Yes, This is Greg Preston from the employment agency. We met last week when she came in to inquire about office work. Oh, that's right. Now, we've just had some details come in of a job which might interest you. Okay, so this is a position for a receptionist. I believe I should have done that sort of work before here. Yes, I have. I worked in a sports center for a couple of years before I got married and I had the children. Right. Well, this job's in Forum, so not too far away for you, and it's at the medical center there. Okay. So where exactly is that? It's quite near the station on Road. Sorry, Chastes Road, and that is Chastons. Okay, thanks. So, what would the work involve dealing with inquiries from patients? Yes, and you'd also be involved in making appointments, whether face to face or on the phone, and rescheduling them if necessary. Fine, that shouldn't be a problem. And another of your duties would be keeping the center's database up up to date. Then you might have other general administrative duties as well, but those would be the main ones. Okay. Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10. Now, when the details came in, I immediately thought of you because one thing they do require is someone with experience. And you did mention your work at the sports center when you came in to see us. Yes, in fact, I enjoyed that job. Is it anything else they are looking for? Well, they say it is quite a high press environment. They are always very busy. And patients are often under stress, so they want someone who can cope with that and stay calm and at the same time be confident when interacting with the public. Well, after dealing with 3 children, all under 5, I reckon I can cope with that, I'm sure. You can, and then another thing they mention is that they are looking for someone with good IT skills. Not a problem. So I should be interested in following this up. Sure. When would it start? Well, they are looking for someone from the beginning of next month. But I should tell you that this isn't a permanent job. It is a temporary, so the contract will be just to the end of September. But they do say that there could be further opportunities after that. Okay, and what would the hours be? Well, they want someone who can start at a 4 to 8 in the morning. Could you manage that? Yes, my husband would have to get the kids up and off to my mother's. She is going to be looking after them while I am at work. What time would I finish? 1:15. That shouldn't work out all right. I can pick the kids up on my way home, and then I'll have the afternoon with them. Oh, one thing is there parking available for staff at the center. Yes, there is, and it's also on a bus route. Right, well, I expect I'll have the car, but it is good to know that, okay. So, where do I go from here? Well, if you are happy for me to do so, I'll forward your CV and the references, and then the best thing would probably be for you to phone them so they can arrange for an interview. Great. Well, thank you very much. You are welcome. Bye. Now, bye. And that is the end of part one. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part one. A part two. Part two. You will hear a guide at a farming museum talking to a group of visitors. First, as you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Museum of Farming Life. I understand that it is your first visit here, so I'd like to give you some background information about the museum and explain a little about what you can see during your visit. So, where we are standing at the moment is the entrance to a large building that was constructed in 1880 as the home of a local businessman, Alfred Palmer, of the Palmer Biscuit Factory. It was later sold and became a hall of residence for students in 1911 and a museum in 1951. In 1905, in 2005, a modern extension was built to accommodate the museum's collections. The museums owned by the university and apart from two rooms that are our offices. The university uses the main part of the building. You may see students going into the building for lessons, but it is not open to museum visitors. I am afraid it is a shame because the interior architectural features are outstanding, especially the room that used to be a library. Luckily, we've managed to keep entry to the museum free. This includes access to all the galleries, outdoor areas, and the rooms for special exhibitions. We run activities for children and students, such as the museum club, for which there is no charge. We do have a donation box just over there, so feel free to give whatever amount as you consider appropriate. We do have a cloakroom if you'd like to leave your coats and bags somewhere. Unlike other museums, photography is allowed here, so you might like to keep your cameras with you. You might be more comfortable not carrying around heavy rucksacks, though. Keep your coats and jackets on as it is quite cold in the museum garden today. Before you get the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer. Listen and answer questions 15 to 20. I'd like to tell you about the different areas of the museum. Just inside and outside the main gallery, we have an area called Four Seasons. Here, as you can watch a 4 minute animation of a woodland scene. It was designed especially for the museum by a group of young people on a film studies course. and it is beautiful, and children absolutely love it. But then, so do adults. The main gallery is called Town and Country. It includes a photographic collection of prize-winning sheep and shepherds living town and country and farmhouse kitchen, which is well self-explanatory. Here we have the oldest collection of equipment for making butter and cheese in the country. And this morning, a specialist cheesemaker will be giving demonstrations of how it is produced. You may even get to try some. After that, you can go in two directions. So to the right is a staircase that takes you up to a landing from where you can look down on the gallery. And so to the left is a room called a year on the farm, and there is lots of sitting here. As sometimes we see as a room for school visitors. So it's a good place to stop for a rest. If you are feeling competitive, as you can take our memory test in which you answer questions about things you've seen in the museum. The next area is called Wagon Walk. This contains farm cats from nearly every part of the country. It's surprising how much regional variation there was beside the cards are the display boards with an information about each one. The cards are old and fragile, so we ask you to keep your children close to you and ensure they don't climb on the cards from Pagan Park. You can either make your way back to the reception or go out into the garden or even go back to take another look in the galleries in the far corner of the garden. Bees are magic, but we are redeveloping this area, so you can't visit that at the moment. You can still buy our honey in the shop, though. Finally, there is the pond, which contains all kinds of interesting wildlife, and there are baby ducks that are only a few days old, as well as tiny frogs. The pond isn't deep, and there is a fence around it, so it is perfectly safe for children. And that is the end of part two. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 2. Part 3, following instructions from the tutor, you will hear two trainee teachers discussing the use of origami, paper folding activity in the classroom. First, as you have some time to look at questions 21 to 27. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 27. So no, I, I'm sorry for coughing. So now I want you to discuss the lesson we've just been watching on the video and think about the way in which origami can be a useful educational tool. Can you all work with the person sitting next to you? I had no idea that such a simple thing like folding squares of paper to make the shape of something like a bird could be such an amazing tool. It is made me see origami in a whole new light. I know. Oh, it was interesting to see the educational skills the children were developing by doing origami. On the video, as you could see them really listening listening hard and to make sure they did all the steps in the right order to make the bird that is right in this lesson. They were working individually, but it would also be interesting to see if the children could work out how to make something simple without being given any direction. And that would help with the building teamwork as well. Yes, but much more of a challenge. One thing that really stood out for me was that the children were all having fun while being taught something new, which is a key aim of any lesson with this age group. And although these kids had no problem with folding the paper with younger children, you could do origami to help practice fine motor skills. Absolutely, shall we walk about the individual children we saw on the video? I wrote all their names down and took some notes. Yes, I did too. Okay, good. Let's start with Sid. He was interesting because before they started doing the origami, he was being quite disruptive. Yes, he really benefited from having to use his hands. It helped him to settle down and start concentrating. Yes, I noticed that too. What about Jack? I noticed he seemed to want to work things out for himself. You could see him trying out different things rather than asking the teacher for help. What did you make of Naomi? She seemed to be losing interest at one point, but then she decided she wanted her mouse to be the best, and that motivated her to try harder. She didn't seem satisfied with hers in the end, though. No, Anna was such a star. She listened so carefully and then produced the perfect bird with the very little effort. I, I think the teacher could have increased the level of difficulty for her. Maybe I think it was the first time Zara had come across origami. She looked as if she didn't really get what was going on. She seemed unsure about what she was supposed to do, but in the end, hers didn't turn out too badly. Yeah, I'm sure it was a positive learning experience for her. And before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at question 28 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 28 to 30. I think one reason why the origami activity worked so well in this class was that the teacher was well prepared. Right, I think. Right. I think it would have taken me ages to prepare examples showing each of the steps involved in making the bird, but that was a really good idea. The children could see that they were aiming for, and much better for them to be able to hold something rather than just looking at pictures. And those physical examples supported her verbal explanations. Really, well, it's strange that origami isn't used more widely. Why do you think that is? Well, teachers may just feel it's not that appealing to children who are used to doing everything on computers, especially boys, even if they are aware of the benefits. Oh, I don't know. It is no different to any other craft activity. I bet it is because so many teachers are clumsy, like me. That's true. Too much effort required if you are not good with your hands. Well, anyway, I think we should try it out in our maths teaching practice with year 3. I can see using origami is a really engaging way of reinforcing children's knowledge of geometric shapes, like they were doing in the video, but I think it would also work really well for presenting fractions, which is coming up soon a good idea. That is something most of the times in that class might struggle with origami. Would also be a good practice for using symmetry, but I think they did that last term. Okay, well, let's try and get some idea together and plan the lesson next week. Okay, if you could allow us, that is the end of part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 3. Part 4. You will hear a literature student giving a talk about Victor Hugo, a famous 19th century French writer. First, we have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40. The person I've chosen to talk about is the French writer Victor Hugo. Many people have heard of him because his novel Les Miserables, which he wrote in 1862, is famous around the world. It became a stage musical in the 1980s, and film version was also released in 2012. So some of us, I'm sure, have a pretty general idea of the plot, but we know much less about the author. Today, I'm going to provide a little more insight into this talented man, and I'm going to talk particularly about the home he had on the island of Gary in the British Council Islands and the British Channel Islands. But first, his early career, as I've said, he was a writer. He was at the height of his career in Paris, and he was very highly regarded by his colleagues. As far as the literature was concerned, he was the leading figure of the Romantic movement. However, as well as being a literary genius, he also gave many speeches about issues like the level of poverty in his society. He felt very strongly about this and about other areas where change was needed, did like education. This kind of outspoken criticism was not well linked by the rulers of France, and eventually the Emperor Napoleon III told Victor Hugo to leave Paris and not return. In other words, he sent him into exile. So Victor Hugo was forced to reside in other parts of Europe. Gary was actually his third place of exile, and he landed there in 1855. He produced a lot while on Gary, including Clay Miserables, and to do this, he had to spend a great deal of time in the home that he had there. And this was a property that he bought using his money he made in France from the publication of a collection of his poetry. It was the only poetry he ever owned, and he was very proud of it. The property Victor Hugo bought on Gary was a large five-story house in the capital town of St. Petersburg, and he lived there for 15 years, returning to France in 1870. When Napoleon's empire collapsed, he decorated and furnished each level or floor of the house in unique and wonderful ways, and many people consider the inside of the house to be a work of art today. It's a museum that attracts 200,000 visitors a year. He lived in the house with his family, and the portraits of its members still hang in rooms on the ground floor, along with drawings that he did during his travels and that he felt were important to him. In other ground floor rooms, there are huge tapestries that he would have designed kind and loved. The walls are covered in a dark wood paneling that Victor Hugo created himself by using wooden furniture that he bought in market. The items were relatively inexpensive, and he used them to create intricate carvings. They gave an atmosphere on the lower level and that was shadowy and rather solemn. On the next level of the house, there are two impressive lounges where he entertained his guests. One lounge has entirely red furnishing, such as sofas and old coverings, and the other blue. There is a strong Chinese influence in these areas in themes like the wallpaper pattern and the lamps, which he would have made himself by copying original versions. His library, where he left many of his favorite books, forms the hallway onto the third floor, and was a comfortable area where he could relax and enjoy his afternoons. And then at the very top of the house, there is a room called the lookout, called that because it looks out over the harbor. In the contrast to the rather dark lower levels, it is full of light and was like a glass office where he would write until lunchtime, often at his desk. So Victor Hugo was a man of many talents, but he was also true to his values. While living in his house on Grey, he entertained many other famous writers, but he also invited a large group of local children from the deprived areas of the island to dinner once a week. What's more, he served them and their food, which was an extraordinary gesture for the time period. In 1927, the house was owned by his relatives and they decided to decorate it into the city of Paris. Donated to the city of Paris. It has since been restored using photographs from the period, and as I mentioned earlier, is now a museum that is open to the public. That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part 4, and that is the end of the listening test in the answer test. You would now have 10 minutes to transfer answers to the listening answer sheet.